Okay, so here is our next question. Okay, so if you remember the steps and you follow them, you will always get to the solution. Now this question over here, first thing we say to do is rewrite it so that you have your trigonometric ratio is equal to something. So here I need to make cos x the subject of the formula, so I will add 1 on both sides. Let's do that. So it's 2 cos x is equal to 1, so it's now positive because it went to the other side. And I want cos x to be alone, so I will divide by 2 on both sides. So I divide by 2, divide by 2, and I have cos x is equal to a half. Okay, so from here, after you've done that, that is the first thing you do. You need your sine, cos, or tan to be the subject of the formula. After it is the subject of the formula, the next thing you need to do is work out your quadrants. So you write that here, your quadrants. Then we say to determine the quadrant, you look at what this value is. Is it positive or negative? Remember, if it is 0, then it lies on the line. It is either 0, 90, 180, 270, or 360. Always, because otherwise, if it's positive or negative, then it's definitely in the quadrants. Now here, half is positive, so I need to find out in what quadrants is cos positive. So I will draw my quadrants. So here I'm just drawing my quadrants so that you're familiar with it. When you've done more practice, you don't have to draw the quadrants. You will just know it's this and this quadrant, and then you go ahead and solve it. But when you're beginning, it's always good to show everything you did, so that when you're revising, it's familiar to you. Okay, so we know that in the first quadrant, all of them are positive. In the second quadrant, only sine is positive. In the third quadrant, tan is positive, and in the fourth quadrant, cos is positive. So we're looking for the quadrants where sine is positive, so it's definitely the first quadrant, and it is the fourth quadrant, okay, because we want a positive cos. That means the first quadrant where all of them are positive, and the fourth quadrant where only cos is positive. So this was step number 1. This is step number 2, and then step number 3. I'm sure you remember. Step number 3 was to find our reference angle. So I'll write that down. Number 3 is reference angle. Okay, so I need to find the reference angle. So I have this, cos x is equal to a half. Now remember here, I hope I've mentioned it before, cos is not like a number that you divide by, so I don't say divide by cos on both sides and then it cancels. The way I get rid of cos is by taking cos inverse on both sides. So when I take cos and then cos inverse, they cancel each other out. So essentially what I'm doing is this: I take cos inverse on both sides, and I take cos inverse of that side. So here, these two, just like square root and squared, what happens is they cancel each other out, and then I'm left with only x. So I have x is equals to cos inverse of a half. And this you can work out on your calculator. If your calculator is in degrees, you can try it there. I have cos inverse of half. Okay, that my answer is 60. But remember, this question said our angle should be between 0 and 2 pi. That means the angle should be in radians. So this 60 that I have over here, I need to rewrite it in radians. So I will say x is equal to 60 degrees in radians is pi over 3. So I have pi over 3 radians. Okay, so now I have my reference angle. That was the third step. The fourth step was to combine my reference angle and the quadrants and then get my solutions. So step number 4, this is the solution, the solutions. So x will be in the first quadrant and x will be in the fourth quadrant. So in the first quadrant, x is just equal to theta, which is the reference angle, because my reference angle is always in the first quadrant. And in the fourth quadrant, we said x is equal to 2 pi minus theta. That is the definition. An angle in the fourth quadrant, we rewrite it as 2 pi minus theta. Or if we're measuring in degrees, we say 360 minus theta. So here, if x is equals to theta, it means that x is equals to pi over 3 radians. And if x is equal to 2 pi minus theta, that means it is 2 pi minus pi over 3. So here, what you have is this 5 pi over 3. You can work it out. Don't know how to do it. Say 2 minus 1 over 3. And then you get 5 pi over 3. So the answer is 5 pi over 3. Okay, so you can see all I'm doing is I know what the steps are. Step number 1, I need to rewrite my equation that I'm given in this form as cos x is equal to something. Step number 2, I need to determine what quadrant x lies in, depending on the sign of this value over here. We said if this answer or this number here is 0, then that means my answer will be 0 or 360, 90, 180 or 270, because these are the values that will give me 0. And after I find my quadrant, my quadrants, I look for my reference angle, and then I combine the quadrants and the reference angles together. I say x should be in the first quadrant, and that just means x is equal to my reference angle. And because x is in the fourth quadrant, the definition of an angle in the fourth quadrant is like this. Then I just substitute and then work out my answer.